Welcome to Prepping for the Studio. If you're a musician or musical artist that wants to learn more about what goes on, how to prepare, or how to make the most out of your studio session, you're in the right place. Prepping for the Studio. Episode 7. Roy and Brian continued their discussion on what goes on in a tracking session. How might you go about making takes? How do you overcome recording anxiety? They also talk about the importance of performance and putting emotion into what you do. Steps in the process like comping, editing, tuning, overdubbing, and rough mixes are also discussed. Thanks for joining. Hello. Welcome back to Prepping for the Studio, the podcast for musicians who want to know more about the studio, how to prepare, how to make the most of their time and money, and what to expect. I'm Roy Silverstein, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brian Schubel.
Hello.
What's up, Brian?
Not much.
Cool. Well, we're here at episode 7, believe it or not. And we've gone through a whole bunch of stuff, and we're actually at a point where it's time to hit record.
Yeah.
Finally.
Right on.
I feel like everyone's probably been waiting. When are they actually going to get to the recording part?
That was all the setup. So
Yeah.
It's like setting the mics up and
we were doing all kinds of preparation stuff and pre-production and getting your instruments ready and et cetera, et cetera. And now finally, we are ready to hit record.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to go about making takes. Let's call it making takes. You can do the song from start to finish. That's one option. So basically that lets you have all these, takes. And you can do what's called comping, if you want, of those takes, which is like kind of maybe using the chorus from this one, the verse from that one, blah, blah, blah. And it's a pretty easy way to go about it, but you got to play the whole song through. Another thing you can do is you can record up until a point where you make a mistake, if you do make a mistake, and then you can punch in, right? Punching in is when you'll hear like everything a little bit before the mistake, and then it starts recording and you start playing and replace the audio, hopefully with good audio. Or you can try doing things in sections. So in that case, you could just focus on recording the chorus or just record the first one and just do it over and over until you get one that you actually like. Or you can do some combination of all these things. Yeah. Do some full takes and then be like, okay, now let's focus in on the chorus, and then, be like, oh, well, everything's great except I need to punch in this line, that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the like pros and cons, I guess, of the different ways of doing it. Full takes, I mean, that lets you get like into the full song, right?
Yep. Get the vibe. Yeah,
you get the full vibe, you get the full performance of you doing the song, and that can be good for really expressing yourself throughout the song and the dynamics of it and everything.
Yeah, totally.
But you have to do the full song, which takes a while, maybe gets old, I don't know. Punching in is really convenient, but it can be tricky because in the what we call pre-roll section, the time when you're hearing like what you did prior to it, depending on how it's set up, you may not be able to hear your live mic, and that can cause you to like play too loud sometimes, or just not kind of like match the tonality or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you actually are in record, like it might sound weird and it can be obvious that it's a punch in.
Louder or different vibe. Or
right.
Softer.
So it can be tricky. It takes a little practice, but totally doable. And then recording in sections, I mean, that's cool because it lets you focus in on a particular section. The downside is you maybe don't have that flow that you would get doing take to take, and maybe it will sound a little disjointed.
Yeah. But if there's like a lick you're really trying to get or something, you can really do it over and over and over and over until you really get
solos.
Get a few you like, and then
solos are often done, I think, like let's just do the solo a million times.
Totally. Yep.
And then you can comp that.
And you can punch on that too.
Yes, of course. That's the thing, is you can do combination of all these things. Whatever method you choose, like here's how it kind of goes down. Like the engineer is going to talk to you over the headphones. Okay. We call that talk back, right? And they're going to tell you something like, okay, we're rolling, which probably referred to tape machines, which actually had reels that rolled, I guess.
Yep.
Nowadays, if you're recording digital, there's nothing rolling. But
even though they may say, we're recording.
Yeah, we're recording. We're
rolling.
Okay, go ahead. Or they'll give you some cue, or you might hear a click track come in. If you are working with a click track, and this is you're recording from the top of the song, leave some clicks in there, 8 clicks or something like that.
Count off is nice.
Yeah, a little count off. Maybe the drummer does a little, 4 clicks too if they're recording with the drummer. But it's good to make that consistent. And if you're trying to do multiple takes from top to bottom that you're going to comp, you want to definitely start always at the same spot.
Yeah, that's very helpful, especially if you're doing playlists in Pro Tools.
Yes, exactly. Playlist is basically you have all the different takes that you did in kind of like a drop down menu in Pro Tools and other programs too. But in Pro Tools, it's really easy to then audition, each take and make that compilation of takes.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to just go over. Probably should have spoke sooner. Is when you say tracking. In the old days, tracking was always when the whole band is together playing, and so you have drums, bass, guitar, whatever it is.
Right.
And tracking can also, because I was talking to you earlier before we actually started recording, tracking can also be, let's say the guitar player is going to redo his guitar track, so that he's tracking his guitar track.
Right.
And the one thing I was going to say about if you're tracking and everybody's decided to play all the way through, my feeling is you always even if somebody makes some mistakes, you keep going, because the drummer might be killing it.
Yeah.
He just might be like, I'm on fire. And all of a sudden you stop the take. He's going to be not too happy about it.
Especially if you're really isolated, because if you're isolated, then people can replace their mistakes without interfering with the other.
Totally. You can come back and do an overdub. Or
it's more tricky when there is a lot of bleed.
Yeah.
Then that may not work.
Yeah.
But it depends on how much bleed.
But that's something you talk about before you start, if you're all tracking together. I mean, you certainly can stop and punch in, but, just something to remember.
Right. Yeah, good point. But if you are doing the full takes thing, you probably are going to want to record to a click, so that just makes the timing consistent throughout, If you don't do it with a click, then it can be hard to comp different takes together, because maybe you played this chorus faster than the other, and then it's just hard to use this part because it's actually now off from the other. And so better if you do recording to a click if you're going to use that method.
Yeah. I've seen guys where you just use the click to count off, hoping that they'll hold on to that tempo, but it's still
depends how good your drummer is.
Yeah.
And or other people in the band.
Yeah.
But basically, the engineer is going to give you a cue that you should start. You start. If you make a mistake, I think what your point was, maybe don't stop. Depends, But if the whole band is completely messed up, then you just stop and you just either go back to the top or you punch in or, do whatever. And sometimes it can take a lot of takes.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad about it. And
false starts.
Yeah. I mean, engineers get used to this.
Yeah.
Okay, we know some bands are really tight and it only takes them 1 take or 3 takes, and it's done. In other groups, it's no, it's going to be a lot of takes.
Yeah. And you may even want to come back to it.
Yeah. You may have to take a break, come back. Because what can happen is what I call red light syndrome, which is everything's cool until you're recording, and then suddenly you're really nervous.
Yeah.
And you're really anxious. And it happens to the best of us. I mean, I've experienced it because I used to, be a musician. Well, I guess I'm sort of still a musician.
It never goes away.
Yeah, but I've recorded myself even, and even doing that, I would get nervous when I knew I was recording.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things in your head, a lot of feelings, of expectations maybe of yourself, of maybe you feel your bandmates maybe have expectations, or maybe you think the engineer, the producer has certain expectations. And if you're in a studio situation and that the clock is ticking and you're paying by the hour, that might be bothering you, or a lot of things could be bothering you, and just it's not your bedroom anymore. It's I mean, that's the importance of, I think last time we talked about kind of making your space feel comfortable, because it helps a lot to feel comfy. But it happens. And if you can remember that you're just recording music.
Yeah.
You're not doing surgery.
Yeah.
No one's going to die here.
Yeah. And sometimes getting through that first take can help you relax,
Yeah.
First couple takes, maybe.
Right.
Because you realize nothing's going to happen. You're playing the song.
Yeah. You're just playing music here. It's supposed to be fun, you know? And if you're doing it right, it is fun. But maybe you also have some relaxation strategies, some breathing work, or things that you might do otherwise for your life. You can use those things, and yeah, that might help you, or you can take a break. It can take a while, but the thing that's cool is that sometimes those first takes are still the best takes, even if you were kind of nervous, because your energy was fresh, and can often sometimes be something magical in those takes. So,
yeah, totally.
Just get through them, and you never know, some of those might actually make the cut.
Yeah. And remember, between takes, check your tuning.
Oh, yes.
Nothing worse than getting through a song and you realize you're out of tune.
Right. I think we've mentioned it before, but it just serves to mention again. Tune. Just tune.
Yeah.
Between every take.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
So totally normal to have this red light syndrome. You can get through it. You can get past it. And the more recording you do in a studio, I think the more you'll get used to the studio situation.
Yeah, true.
I want to emphasize also the need to impart, emotion into your performance, because timing and tuning, these things can be fixed, and we'll talk about that. But it's impossible for an engineer to imbue the recording with emotion. If it's not there, it's just not there.
Yeah.
So I would err on the side of really going for it with your performance and worrying less about hitting the note exactly or hitting the timing exactly, and focus more on playing with feeling.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, because it's just impossible to put it in there if it's not there.
Yeah, there's no emotion plug-in yet.
Hasn't been invented yet. We'll see. Maybe someone will come up with some way of doing that. But right now, it's up to the human being to, actually impart that stuff. So, yeah, I would say the song's number one, but the performance is number two. So if you can put in that energy into the performance, it's really going to outshine any deficiencies elsewhere in the whole thing. And if you think about older recordings, I mean, they're full of things that are out of tune because they didn't have pitch correction. They're full of even like recording errors, let's call them, like distortion, unintentional distortion, because the singer got really loud and like overdrove the mic pre. Doesn't matter though, right? Like these old recordings, classic recordings, everyone still loves them.
Yeah, trying to copy them too.
Yeah. and why? Because I think the performances were so great. And the songs were great too, but the performances too, was a big part of it.
Yep. Yeah. So
there's definitely something to be said there about, how it can really outshine even a mistake or technical error, anything.
Yeah. One thing I could say is that sometimes when you're doing it by yourself, let's say you're doing a vocal, it's time to do vocals without the band.
Okay.
Is you can oversing. Like somebody's saying to you, got to put emotion into it, and you got to, this and that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can have singers overdo it, almost to a point where it's not real.
Right.
It's you got to feel it inside and pull that out rather than try to push it out, so to speak.
Makes sense. I think it helps to actually try to go to the place of what the song is about to you. If you wrote the lyrics, let's say, as the singer, which often is the case, try to remind yourself of what the song is about. Maybe have a photo or something that would remind you in front of you, that kind of thing.
It's a great idea. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it needs to be genuine. I think people can often tell when you're phoning it in.
Yeah, disconnected from the song.
Yeah, or you're hamming it up or something like that. Yeah, over singing. Interesting. Yeah. It makes me think of something else, but now I can't remember what.
There's many times I've I've said that to singers. They just got to relax.
Oh,
got to get inside the song.
I know what it was. I've heard people talk about it should feel conversational.
Yeah.
Like point. You're singing to one person, because music does connect kind of to one person. Oftentimes people are often listening to it by themselves on headphones or just in a room or whatever. It's only at a concert really when you especially get this like singing to a mass audience all at the same time. But music is very like one-to-one. So if you can just think about it like you're singing to one person, you're trying to connect with one person, I think that can help too.
I think that's when you hear artists or you've been to a show and it was just an amazing performance. It's because they connected. They felt it and they emoted it. It came out.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes they make eye contact with individuals, like, and then they'll switch to someone else. And it may help, of course, if you're not looking at someone. I mean, I think we talked about that in the other episode. You might want to sing facing away from the glass where people are watching you, because it can feel like you're in a fishbowl and everyone's eyes are on you. And sometimes you might want to be kind of hidden away in a booth or like behind a gobo or something. Yeah. So that's all fine. Whatever can make you feel comfortable and give that performance. I think it's...
Yeah. A good headphone mix.
We talked about that too. Yeah. Just raise your hand if your headphone mix sucks. Like, correct that, make it so that you can feel really, really in the mix and part of the song. Yeah. I wanted to move on to what I called sorting through the mess. This is, if you did do a bunch of takes, and now you've got all this stuff in Pro Tools or wherever, that comping process or that picking of takes process, is definitely a step along the way here, right? So if you're just listening to full takes and you're just going to like, that's the take, that can happen. But it could be like, well, the verse of this take is really good and the chorus of this take is good, then you do the comp. And you can have your engineer do that by themselves or producer do that by themselves, and then you can just kind of weigh in, or you could be very involved in that if you want. I kind of like it when people are involved, because then I can just, let's say we have 3 takes, I can be like, okay, I'll do it in little chunks, like, let's say it's a vocal. I'll do like line by line, like, here's this line, take 1, take 2, take 3. And then usually we all agree, like, one of them is the best. Yeah. You kind of just want to go through that and have some say in that, So you want to, get this right before you move on to another song or to like another step in the process, like let's say the overdub process where maybe you're going to break down your setup. Let's say, we're talking about doing your initial tracks, right? You kind of want to know that you have it. Yeah. So this is a way that you can know for sure, is actually going through the process of going through the takes one by one and figuring out one is just perfect, or if you need to do a comp and you did the comp and yes, okay. Yeah, right. Because once you start breaking down setups, it's hard to go back. Yeah. And get the same sound. Yeah, to get the exact same sound. Even with good notes, I mean, a microphone that's an inch off still can sound very different sometimes, depending on what instrument's being mic'd. Best thing is to definitely know that you have it before you move on. Yeah. To the next further process. Yeah. And now, a word from our sponsor, Rarefied Recording. Oh, that's me. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my studio, Rarefied Recording, and the services I offer there. The studio itself was built from the ground up, from the masterful plans of Mr. Wes Lachaud, so it sounds fantastic both in the control room and the live room. A 32-channel Neve Genesis console holds center court and is complemented by a wide array of outboard gear, instruments, and microphones. Your music will be in good company. If you live in the San Diego area, just head on over to rarefiedrecording.com to learn more and book a tour. You can also hear examples of my tracking and mixing work. If you aren't lucky enough to live in San Diego, let me be the first to suggest the idea of a destination recording experience. San Diego is BBB approved. The Better Business Bureau? No, beaches, burritos, and beer. Even if you're not a beach person, who's to complain with temperatures that are very often in the 70s? Even the winter months are averaging in the mid-60s. And being relatively dry, rain is unlikely to get in your way. The studio is very centrally located, and you can get to just about anywhere in the area in 15 to 20 minutes. Even Mexico. And while burritos are technically not a food you find in Mexico itself, San Diego has taken the concept to blissful culinary heights. You can't go hardly 100 yards here without running into a little taco shop that will be 10 times better than whatever options you have in your town. If Mexican isn't your thing, no worries. There are tons of great restaurants in the area, including a barbecue place 3 blocks away that rivals anything I've tried in Texas. And adjacent to it is one of over 150 craft breweries in San Diego. If you love beer, we gotcha. The West Coast IPA style is a specialty here, but we've got brewers doing all kinds of beers, and several have tasting rooms in walking distance. Did I mention that accommodations are available? So head on over to rarefiedrecording.com and reach out for a quote today. That's RAREFIED recording.com. And now back to the episode. Now, there is a step that we'll call editing and tuning that can happen after this, if it makes sense. And depending on what kind of music you're doing, like some music I feel like you probably shouldn't mess with it too much.
Yeah, right.
You know?
It's got a vibe.
Yeah, it's got a vibe. Like, yeah, there's little timing things that are like not perfect, quote unquote. Tuning maybe is like, yeah, slips here and there. But like I said, with the classic recordings, listen to them.
It's got a good vibe.
Yeah, like all that stuff is littered with problems, quote unquote, of like that. So maybe your music is like that, where it's supposed to be a little bit loose. It's supposed to be very organic, and it doesn't need to be edited or tuned. But some music really does, and only you can really make that call. I feel like it's a good idea, if you can, to do this step after the initial tracking before the overdubbing, so that whatever you overdub is kind of like connected now to the edit,
the master tape.
Yeah, because you might change some major things. I mean, you can do what I call macro edits, right? You can be like, you know, this song's a little bit long, like why don't we chop off the last chorus or something?
Right.
Or, man, it really could use like the chorus to be doubled at the end, you know? So you can do like macro edits where you copy and paste things.
Yeah.
So better to do that kind of stuff ahead of time. But also, you know, even what I'd call micro edit, which would be like pushing a kick drum like a little bit left or right, you know, also better if you do that before you do overdubs, because then you're playing to that instead of playing to something that's actually going to be edited later, and then everything has to maybe be
the timing changes. Yeah.
So a good idea if you can do that before you get into the overdub phase.
Definitely.
At the very least, you want to do it before mixing. Yeah. As a mixer, Brian, I mean, do you enjoy spending time editing and tuning when you should be actually mixing?
I don't, but I almost always have to.
You feel like you end up doing that, but it's not really mixing, right? It's editing.
It's editing. Yeah. You know, the funny thing is that, like you said, depending on the style of music, if it's something that's really tight and it needs to be really in time, if that's really in time, the mix is going to sound better. But if it's got these downbeats that are kind of washy, you know, like everybody's hitting the downbeat a little off,
right?
That's not going to be as punchy. So in order for me to get a really punchy mix, sometimes I have to go in and check those downbeats, or, you know, even little things like that.
Right.
Or the tuning of the vocal is suspect. I might have to get a couple of notes here or there.
Yeah. Now, a couple things here and there is, I think, okay. But if you were given like a track that's like, whoa, this whole thing is way out of tune and it's needs all kinds of editing, like you'd be spending significant amounts of time doing that, which isn't really mixing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't want to do that to your mixer, because you want your mixer to spend their time actually doing mixing, which we'll talk about on another episode of this podcast, what mixing is all about. But
well, you know, there used to be what was called a Pro Tools guy back when we would record. And he was the guy, when you finished all your recordings, you sent it to him. Right. And he would edit it all. Yeah. He would go through all the tracks, edit and tune everything. And then you get it back and then you mix it. So that was
a lot of power to that guy.
The big, Lars was the guy we used up in Portland. Yeah.
Oh, Lars.
Yeah, he's on a lot of big records.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, nowadays, I don't know if there's budget to have like a special guy, you know, or gal to do that, but there could be.
I mean, I find I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
You know, which is fine. You know, you just have to put on that hat and, you know, think about that only and not think about the other things.
Right. Yeah, it's very different than the more creative side of mixing. Yeah, I definitely prefer to have the editing and tuning happen before the mix. Now, speaking of tuning, it's mostly applied to vocals, but it actually can be done to other instruments if needed. People often associate it with auto-tune, but that's just one tool that's out there, right? And auto-tune can be used in a very aggressive way that has a particular sound that you've heard on a lot of records, modern records, that where you can hear this very like discrete steps between notes being hit.
Yeah.
It's used as an effect, really. Oftentimes, the T-Pain thing or whatever, it's become very, very common. People are using it as an effect, basically. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can be done more subtly, and there's other tools that can be used, like Melodyne is one of them that can be very natural, and there's no real harm. And, some people might think it's cheating or something like that. I mean, I think it's okay. Like, if the performance was amazing, but there was just like a couple spots where you just wear a little more out than you wanted to, like, hey, no harm.
Yeah.
Like, do a little tuning.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay. It's okay.
Yeah. If it's bothering you, So, yeah, auto-tune, people have a really negative thought about it sometimes. Depends on what kind of music, but it doesn't have to be auto-tuned. It can be very precisely like, this note needs to be adjusted. Everything else is fine.
Yeah. A syllable.
Yeah. Just one syllable. Yeah. So it can get real granular like that. I can't say that word.
Yeah. Seems to be more acceptable now, at least I think. When I get a song to mix, they say, well, can you tune it? It's whereas before it was almost like you don't talk about tuning, because the singer may not want people to think they've been tuned.
Yeah, maybe the ego feels a little bruised if they have to be tuned.
But now, I feel in the last couple of years, it's been, do a little tuning if you need to, or, there's a little more acceptance of it.
Yeah, I've felt like most people that I've worked with are totally cool with tuning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I don't think it should be used to the nth degree unless it needs to be for the genre.
Right.
I try to keep it really natural when it makes sense. Just, so you can't even tell,
Yeah, me too.
Sometimes you could be more heavy-handed with like a background vocal, especially if it's like a stack of them. But yeah, you want to usually, unless the genre calls for that real obvious tuning, it's usually you want to make sure it's done in a way that's not so obvious. Yeah. And the tools now are good enough to do that. So
yeah.
So we mentioned about overdubbing, but let's talk about it a little more. That's after the initial tracking and probably this editing and tuning phase. You can add more tracks to the song. You can add more parts to the song, and you'll be hearing what you've done previously in the headphones and then playing on top of it. And you can approach that tracking of the overdubs just like you did the initial tracking, full takes or punching in after you make a mistake, or just work on sections or combination.
Yeah.
And you might have the red light syndrome thing happen.
Especially if everybody's staring at you.
Yeah.
At least when the band's all playing, they're doing their own thing. And you only have a couple eyes maybe looking at you from the control room. Whereas when it's you doing the vocal, you have the whole band looking at you and the engineers looking at you.
Yeah, it can be a little more pressure, definitely, when it's an overdub. But try to use the relaxation techniques or whatever you need to do to get yourself over that. Because all that stuff applies again in the overdub phase. Yeah. But that's where you can really layer the song, and
focus on your part.
Yeah. Or maybe you're replacing some parts from the initial tracking. Like, let's say you did do guitars, with bass and drums, but maybe you didn't think they were good enough.
Yeah.
Or they were recorded in a little ISO booth and you wanted more of the sound of a fuller room. Then you can move the guitar amp into a bigger room and you can do it again.
Yeah.
Or you can just play it better, experiment more, take some more time with it, try out some other amps.
Yeah.
You can go a little deeper.
Yeah.
And replace some stuff.
Yeah.
Or you're adding new parts.
Yeah. And come into the control room.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing is when you're doing guitars, you can be in the control room usually and run lines to wherever the amp is.
Yeah. And hear from the speakers rather than headphones, which is nice.
Yeah. Sounds a lot more natural to be on.
Yeah.
To be on speakers.
And your communication with the engineer too is a little easier because there's no talk back or.
Yeah. Yeah. It's way better to be in the same room as the engineer and the producer if there is one. So yeah, that's overdubbing. I mean, you do as many overdubs until you have the song at that point.
Unless you're on tape.
Right. Yes. We were just talking about earlier. Tape has limits in terms of track count. So there you have to be a little more judicious with how many things you have going on. But Yeah, and usually in the digital world, it's basically unlimited tracks. Not that you need to do on crazy high track count stuff, just do what's appropriate for the song. But now along the way, at any point that you're stopping for the day or whatever, you might want to get some rough mixes, right? You know, just to give you a sense of like how things are going. Take them home, listen to them in your car or whatever. I mean, they are rough mixes. You have to remember that. Like, don't judge them too harshly as far as how they sound. Hopefully they're sounding cool, you know?
Yeah.
But don't come to your engineer and be like, man, this just doesn't sound as good as like this other thing that's released and already been like fully mixed. And
Yeah.
that's not fair.
Yeah. Or something was too loud, or
get nitpicky. Oh, the reference is great, but you know, at such and such time, this guitar is too loud. It's like, yeah, okay, I know.
The reverb's too much. Or,
it's like, okay, noted. But it's just a rough mix. The point is to see if you maybe want to add more things to it, if the performances are good enough, that kind of thing. You know, you get a sense of that. It's definitely worth doing it. Now, rough mixes can take some time to create sometimes. Like, it's kind of annoying as an engineer when, like, you get to the end of the session, like, you've used up all the time that they booked, and then they're like, hey, can we get a rough mix?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because at that point, the engineer is basically doing it on their own time, not getting paid for it.
Right.
So it's nice to leave some time at the end of the session, you know, however long the engineer thinks they need to do those rough mixes, and let them do that.
Yeah. And he wants to do kind of a decent rough mix for you. I don't think anybody wants to just give you a board balance.
Yeah.
You know, they want to maybe do a little bit of something to it.
Yeah, it's nice when you have it a little time, and then, it will sound that much better, and it will give you a better sense of how the whole thing's coming together.
Yeah.
Now, you have to be careful also of what we'll call demo-itis, because you may have made a demo of the song, right? So now this is the first time you've heard a different recording of the song. And sometimes you can be like, oh man, I like the demo more. Yeah. It might be because you just listened to that demo a billion times. And that's now what you think of the song as.
Yeah. You're attached to it.
Yeah, you're attached to it in a weird way. So try to judge what this new recording sounds like on its own merits, you know, and not overly thinking back to the demo.
And my guess is before you did the original demo, in your head, what you just did in the studio is what you always wanted to do, but you had to do the demo yourself because that's all you had.
Yeah.
So remember that. So judge it on its own merits, you know.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, there may be something about the demo that you like better, and you can try to work towards that. You know, it's fair enough. But yeah, it's a trap that you can fall into.
There's also, you know, if they were working in Pro Tools or Logic or something, and they have something they just can't get better, you can sometimes pull that into the new version.
Totally.
If the tempo's the same.
And occasionally there's something about your performance that you did on a demo, or a weird sound that you got that you just were not able to get again. And say, hey, if it works in the real production, do it.
Put it in there.
Yeah. So there's no foul in that, no harm in that. So rough mixes, you'll definitely want to do them, I think, before you get to mixing stages, the real mixing stage. So then you can definitely like listen to them and be like, yes, everything is here that I want in this song. The performances are all good enough. We're ready to mix, you know, because you don't want to get to mixing and then be like, oh man, I wish I had played that better. Yeah. Or, oh man, I wish there was a string section here, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're here right now. Do it now, you know?
Yeah.
Or before you mix.
Yeah. So if you don't get any roughs throughout the process, at least get them like once you think you're done with the whole tracking process, tracking and overdubbing and editing and all that. And that gives you a sense of like, yes, I'm ready to move to the next stage of mixing, which we'll cover in the next episode.
Cool.
Wow, this was a short one.
Wow. Quick. Oh, we've been through it.
That's all I had to say. If you got any other ideas or thoughts about tracking?
No. I mean, I think we covered it, and we covered a lot of the things before, which was pre-production, how to track. And,
all the preparations of yourself, of your instruments. And if you do all that stuff, the tracking session should go very smoothly. You know what you're there to do. You know, everyone's ready for it.
You know everybody's part, what they're all doing. You know what the engineer's doing.
The engineer.
You know to give him some space.
Yeah. The engineer's prepared. They know what they're doing for the day. They have an idea of what kind of sounds you want. Everyone knows their parts. Everyone's practiced.
Tempo.
The tempo's been decided on.
Key of the song.
Key of the song is correct for your singer. When everything is lined up, it can go very smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this podcast is kind of about. Is like helping you get to that point where you are making the most of your time in the studio, because it is expensive, you know, and you want to fly through it if you can. Yeah. And make it feel like a breeze, and everyone's having a great time, and it's fun. Yeah. As it should be.
I mean, I think there's been a few projects I've done here at your studio where we had 3 days to do a full record, which I think was maybe 10 or 12 songs. Mm-hmm. And everybody, they were prepared. They came in. We did 3 takes or 4 takes of each song, whipped them out. Mm-hmm. Last day did overdubs, made some rough mixes. I mean, we got it all done within the 3 days. But that's because everybody worked really hard. Yeah. And was ready for the studio.
Totally.
I'm sure you've done very similar.
Yeah. And I've had the opposite experience too, where people come in and they're not prepared. And they were hoping to get all this stuff done, and they're like, can't even get through one song. And it's like, okay, guys, you have some homework to do.
Yeah. Do you have time next week, Roy?
Yeah. So you don't want to fall into that. You want to be on the other side where you come in and it's like smooth sailing. Yeah. And then you get great results. I don't know. I guess that's it for this episode. Please like, subscribe, send us an email, send us some comments. The ebook that this whole thing is based on is available for you at preppingforthestudio.com. So yeah, we shall see you next time.
Cool. Bye. Bye. Take care.
That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to Prepping for the Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Episode info and my ebook, A Musician's Guide to the Recording Studio, are available at preppingforthestudio.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out there. Prepping for the Studio was recorded and edited at Rarefied Recording by me, Roy Silverstein. Theme music written by myself and Ariel Levine. Performed and recorded by Ariel Levine. Many thanks to my co-host Brian Schubel and you. Best of luck to you and your musical endeavors. And remember, as Alexander Graham Bell once said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. We'll see you next time.